Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, we have that opening where we have John and Lamar kind of leading a squad trying to they were in the location that Carly was in last and trying to get information. And obviously, him getting a little heated the moment the dude spits on him, he lost his cool. And it's like, do you know who I am? Which is now that in itself speaks volumes, because for him, it's like, I'm Captain America. You show me some damn respect. But the dude's like, I know who you are and I don't care. Because also, that bothers him a lot, because it's like Steve Rogers would have gotten some respect. But no, not me. I'm Captain America. This symbol means something, but it's also like the man that's currently behind that symbol. His name, who he is as Captain America, doesn't hold the weight. So, it's this responsibility he wants to bear, but also at the same, I just think that's so interesting. He has to be like, do you know who I am? Sure, I'm Captain America. He has to flex on it, So I think that's so interesting, and it's so frustrating for him, because this is his mission. Hell, he went out of his way to tell Sam and Bucky, hey, stay out of my way when we get things started. Just make sure you stay the hell out of our ways. And now it's because I think for him, he looks at it as a bit of an embarrassment, because it's they got away the first time. It's because so much is riding on this, because you're supposed to be the new Captain America. If you're up here failing all the time, it's oh, this is who we choose to be our new Captain America. It's going to rub off that way. So he feels the need to go above and beyond. He's I need to prove myself, because because this symbol and bearing that shield, it comes with so many expectations. If you don't meet those expectations, he feels like he's a bit of a failure, because he has such a legacy to live up to. Because dude, how can you live up to the legacy that is Steve Rogers when you consider everything Steve did, everything he's been a part of? Let's count all the MCU movies he's been a part of, from the first Avengers all the way to Endgame. Kind of hard to follow up a mantle of someone who helped save the freaking universe. But that's what I'm saying. It's just Steve isn't just American hero. Yes, first and foremost, yeah, America, yeah. Sure, there's that angle to it. He's a world-renowned hero too, because he helped save, once again, not just Earth, the freaking universe. So that, once again, it's a hard legacy to compare to, and I like that. That is something that I think we're going to see slowly, more and more as the season progresses. It's that chip away at him, just he's got a chip on his shoulder about it. So for him, just to get whatever results he needs to, he's willing to cross whatever lines. Now, because it seems like maybe that's some of the stuff that him and Lamar did before, because it's now he got to get all, once again, shake hands, kiss babies. As Captain America, he's got to do the whole rigmarole. So for him, it's he's just used to punching stuff and just kind of doing whatever's necessary to get the job done. And so he's kind of willing to kind of start crossing those lines, doing whatever he needs to, which even Lamar is yeah, we really shouldn't kind of be doing that. Just because it's you're Captain America, you probably shouldn't be doing that. We're kind of, our jobs and our positions are kind of more in the spotlight, especially they're connected to GRC. So it's kind of they're supposed to probably be on a more up and up. So them kind of crossing any lines will kind of look badly upon the organization as well. So even though the organization is kind of getting some bad publicity in general, just because it's yeah, you're helping out all the people that were displaced because of the blip, but you're also displacing so many people who weren't, so many people who had this particular life during the blip, so much was kind of taken from them. It's those who came back are more important to those who are already here. It's it was almost there was no middle ground found to kind of help everybody. It's just because that's why the Flag Smashers are what they are, because it's the people that came back take more importance. We kind of see in this episode for Carly, which, side note, that camp they were in, it said Latvia. I'm isn't Latvia where Dr. Doom kind of doesn't it eventually become his country? So I'm oh, interesting. If I'm not mistaken, isn't it? I might be thinking of the wrong country. If I'm wrong, do correct me. But I swear, isn't it Latvia? Like I said, maybe not. But for Carly, we see that element come up when she ends up having to watch her mom die. Because her mom didn't get the medical supplies she needed because other people took priority. It's oh, your mom was living here this entire time, so those supplies kind of go towards those who had disappeared. And that's the most frustrating thing about it later on for her, because obviously it's that's the most frustrating thing of you she had this dream about what her life could have been. It's like, yeah, that 5 years was rough. And she even went to Madripoor because it's like there was a place that she could make a life for herself. It's like so many people were cast aside the moment people returned because it's like, because of that, we had like nowhere else to go because, it's like what was our home was taken from us because of someone that came back, So, of course, you're going to hold some animosity towards those who came back, especially the organization that's more so supporting them than people who were left behind. And I think that's such an interesting element. And I think she goes to a much heavier extent. Yeah, they steal and stuff like that, but they've never gone to the extent that Carly went in this episode and she blew up the facility. And then Dundo Swiffer's like, whoa. There are people inside. It's like, yeah, but this is the only way they're going to understand. It's like to make our point, to make our mark. If we have to kill a couple people along the way, then so be it, because they won't listen otherwise. To be fair, she's not in the right mindset. She just lost her mom. These people hoarding these supplies. She's like, these supplies, like you've been holding these for 6 months. These supplies could have gone to other people who needed them, like my mom. And so that's what's frustrating, because it's a reminder of just like this corrupt system that she feels like fails so many people just to take priority of protecting those who came back. So like that resentment plus her mom's death, just all of it boiled over to the point she's like, she wasn't in the right mindset because she's just angry, right now. She was already angry before that that fire got ignited even more because of losing her mom. So I think that kind of plays into that fact. But obviously not everyone's going to agree with what she just did. But for her, it's like it's a necessary move we have to make, because if these people only respond to violence, like the only way they'll take notice of us if we stop, because the longer we wait, the more people that die, the more people like my mom who have to suffer. Because it's not like, it was because I think she had tuberculosis, so it's like it's not something quick and simple. It's something that she had to suffer through. I had to watch her suffer, and I think that's what adds more fuel to it. So I think that's an interesting element of adding context to this villain, kind of giving us a more understanding of Carly in particular, of why she's took up the fight, like why she's involved in this, why this means so much to her, being a flag smasher and everything. So there's that element to it. Then on the other side of things, we have Bucky making the decision that he's going to go see Zemo alone. It's like, hey, he doesn't like Avengers, which Sam, you are one. The fact of the matter is, obviously we have our connection, so I'm gonna go see him. And Zemo, just to mess with Bucky, says the command, and Bucky's like, that's not going to work. He's like, I figured as much. I just wanted to see your reaction when you hear those commands again. The commands that sent you spiraling to be the killer, and even saying like, hey, honestly, it was nothing personal. You were just a means to an end to do what I needed to. So together, they end up working together. Mainly, it just seemed like it was probably Zemo had already concocted the plan on how to break out of there. It's just he was looking for a reason to, or at the very least, maybe Bucky kind of ended up being like the last bit of his plan. Like he probably already concocted a lot of it and just needed one final piece to it, and Bucky ended up being that piece to kind of help set everything in motion. So obviously Sam's like, whoa, no. Because I love how Bucky's like, hypothetically, what if this happens? And Sam be like, you're too damn calm about explaining this hypothetical. Whoa, no, put him back. We can't work with him. And it's like, what this man did. I mean, this is the man who did something, well, only, two villains can ever say they did? Zemo and Thanos are the only people that could ever say they beat the Avengers. Because, Thanos won. He wiped out half the universe, so he kind of won. Zemo kind of led to everything in Civil War, so he won to a certain extent. Yeah, you could almost make the argument, everything kind of worked out because Thanos got his ass kicked, plus he's dead. Both versions of him, the one from the alternate timeline and the one from this timeline. But also, Zemo got locked up, so an Avengers kind of came together once again. But it is a thing of he broke them for such a long time and made them turn against each other. So that's understandable to an extent. That saying like, the win is still his. But I still love the whole situation of like anytime he's trying to talk, both Bucky and Sam are telling him to shut up, stop talking. He's like, I'm invaluable. Sam's like, shut up. It's like, fine, we'll work with Zemo. The enemy of my enemy, because getting information from him isn't going to happen any other way. So they have to take him along, which I think is so interesting. I was like, I knew they were setting him up to be kind of the main antagonist, but I think that's so interesting. I mean, but that's the thing. You can't underestimate someone like Zemo, the man who manipulated so much to make the Avengers turn on each other. You know, there's no telling what plans he's got rolling in the back of his mind, you know, contingency plans upon contingencies plans type of situation. So he's had a long time to think about it, because we also don't know whether or not he got snapped or not. We haven't gotten to that conversation. Well, something later on makes me think he did get snapped. I'll get because at one point during the episode he references Sokovia. He's like, basically before Sokovia, even before the rubble got cleared away, people were already grabbing at it. So that might have been stuff that was already happening prior to in between Infinity War and Civil War. There was probably already something there, but it seemed like he was more so probably talking about like Endgame as well. It actually begs the question. It makes you wonder, because it didn't come up during WandaVision, but has Wanda been back there? Probably not a reason to go back. Like, it would just be a reminder of your brother being gone. Like, your mom, your dad, and your brother being gone. It's like, of course you're not going to want to go back to that place. There's too many bad memories. But, and he was like, oh, so have you guys been back? And he's like, have you guys been to the memorial? They don't say anything. And he's like, of course, why would you? You know, because obviously what sparked all of this was his family dying, you know? So... but I thought that was such an interesting thing. So it implies like maybe he did get snapped too, or at the very least he knew that Bucky and Sam had gotten snapped. And it's like, oh, you don't know about Sokovia? Well, let me tell you about Sokovia to kind of make them feel more guilty about it. Even though, once again, because that comes up in conversation too, because obviously when they're on the plane, they had that conversation about like, oh, like the book and everything, and Zemo knowing exactly what the names on that list was. I think it was interesting, the one name, because I guess like most of the names will cross out except for that one. What was the old man? What was it? It wasn't. It was it Iori? The old man whose son Bucky had killed. His last name was it Nakajima? Was that it? I'm probably remembering. They said it in the episode, but it's like that was one of the names on the list, and that in particular pissed Bucky off. It's like, don't say another word, I will end you. Just because that's one of the names he's having a hard time crossing off the list. You know, making amends, because how do you make amends for something like that? So I think that hearing that name out loud from anyone, like, especially from Zemo, who is someone who used him as the Winter Soldier, as the assassin, you know, so it makes sense, but why that would rub him the wrong way. But it was an interesting conversation about like, oh yeah, Trouble Man. It's like, yeah, Steve. I introduced it to Steve. What'd you think about it? He's like, yeah, I like Bucky's like, I like 40 minutes. He's like, what, you didn't like it? I liked it. And he's like, oh yeah, it's you know, and Zemo's talking about how perfect it is, how it's a representation of the African American experience, which I love. Sam being like, he's out of line, but he's also right. I mean, Marvin Gaye, he's like, I like Marvin Gaye. I was like, Steve adored Marvin Gaye. But I like that back and forth. But then Zemo said something I thought was so fascinating, where he was basically going on about how, I get it, like, you know, Steve, he talks about the fact that what Steve represented. Like, the fact of the matter is, when you have someone like that, you know, super soldiers, you put them on a pedestal, you know, and they come out and become people like the Avengers. But for him, it's like, because you put these people on a pedestal, we start praising them and not looking at their flaws, seeing kind of what their mistakes and just kind of what's wrong with them. And so for him, it's like kind of essentially saying like that's what leads to cities flying and things like the event. So it's like, which, to be fair, that was more so Bruce Banner and, you know, Tony Stark's like baby. The whole Ultron thing was their thing. But I think what probably in his mind, what kind of sparked that in his head too was like, because Steve was kind of everything, the beginning. He was the first Avenger for a reason, right? So him being created, the super soldier serum, I mean, obviously led to many different things, in particular his creation, and that sparked so much later on down the road. So for him, it's like Steve, the serum used to make Steve into the super soldier was the spark of everything. So that's why he hates it more so than anything, because it's not just necessarily like Steve's 100% behind what Sokovia, but what gave him his strength, what made him kind of what he was kind of part of the reason. So I think that's why. But even kind of making comparison of like, yeah, you hold someone up as this symbol, you kind of forget about their flaws, you kind of just worship the men. That's how he's like, you get Red Skulls. So it's like, you don't want something like that happening. So I just thought that was such an interesting comparison, because obviously it's like, because I guess it's like Steve is a representation of where things could go right. Red Skull is an example of how things could go wrong. That I guess it's a thing of, it's too easy for that to be a thing, because it's like when you kind of almost implying like too that maybe John could be the same thing as a Red Skull, not necessarily like the Nazi angle, but the thing is, if you give a human being ultimate power like that, there can be ramification. He knows that firsthand because of what happened to Sokovia, what happened to his family. That people with powers, like why he has an issue with them, why he has such an issue with the Avengers, because of what happened to his home, because he blames the Avengers for that. So it's like, because of people with these powers. Like I said, it all kind of goes back to the super soldier serum. At least that's kind of how I kind of, ultimately look at it. But they end up going to a place named, Madripoor, which is basically, like, apparently in the 1800s, it was the a pirate sanctuary. And it's like they have to kind of dress up, which I also love that line where the guy was like, oh yeah, some of this food might not be good, and then Zemo was like, you do the smell test, if it isn't good, and give it to them. And it's like, oh, I'm so glad to have you back. I should also point out, he kept being referred, like, I know most people, like, prior to the show coming out and everything, oh my god, people are like, Baron Zemo. I knew him as Zemo, I didn't know the Baron angle. Like, to be fair, it's been a while. I haven't seen Civil War since I rewatched it. So I've seen Civil War twice in its entirety. And that second time was a couple years ago. So I don't remember. So him being a Baron, like, I knew people called him Baron Zemo. I thought that was just like, oh, a supervillain title. I don't know. Maybe that is the case in the comic books. But it's like, oh, he's literally a Baron in a sense of like, oh yeah, being this like high-ranking like nobility of sorts. He's like, yeah, I'm rich. I'm a Baron. I was like, oh, snap. So your name Baron Zemo, it's literally because you are a actual Baron. I was like, oh, that's interesting. I don't remember if that came up during Civil War or not. It might have. And once again, if that's what his name is it because in the comic books he's also a Baron, or is it just oh no, they just gave him a real world reason why he's called Baron Zemo? If you do know, I'll probably look it up myself. But if you do know, let me know in the comments down below. I know there's a lot of people out there who are way more well versed in the comic books than I am, or or at least more knowledgeable on that front. So please do let me know. I'll probably end up looking up some. I might be looking into it after the recording anyway. But nevertheless, I love the whole thing that they got to be in disguise. Bucky's got to go back to his Winter Soldier persona, and then Sam he's like, why? We got to change this because I'm looking like a pimp. And he's like, only an American would have the perspective of a well-dressed, stylish black man as seeing as kind of a pimp, saying that that's an American perspective to kind of have. And I thought that was so interesting because I can definitely see where Sam was coming from with that, but I'm thinking like probably from an outside of America perspective, that's probably not the thing of like, no, you're just a fashionable, well-dressed black man. That's all there is to it. There's no like, oh, pimp to it. Like I just, once again, that might just be an American like stereotype at the very least that we have. But obviously the city is actually kind of cool seeing it from far away. It's like, oh, this is basically like Crime City. That's basically what they're saying. It's like, yeah, this is Pirate Island / Crime City. It looks fantastic. Like just a city of like, wow. I mean, I guess it's like when you consider like pretty much it's a city run on crime, of course, like things are going to be on it. Well, in the grand scheme of like what it looks like, of course, it's going to look high scale with probably all the money and all the dirty business that's taking place there. But obviously they have to find someone named Selby to look into about this information. I love it's like, oh yeah, this special drink made for Conrad, aka Smiling Tiger, and Sam has to drink it and just pretend like he's okay with it and just kind of thumbs up. I love that he also, because I was always halfway expecting, I was like, are you gonna have to put on like an African accent or something like that? But he didn't. He just kept his American accent. I thought was interesting. But I guess that's also why he tried to speak as little as possible. But he just kind of gave a thumbs up. I mean, maybe that's on me to think like, well, because they make a point to say like Conrad was African, so I'd assumed like kind of like a Wakandan accent, not necessarily, but the same like of a vein of like I'd expect him to have, maybe an African accent, not necessarily an American accent, but didn't come up in conversation. But also Bucky single-handedly kicking some ass because he had to pretend like he was still under Zemo's control. Also, they had to bug the shit out of him when like Zemo was like, oh yeah, like Selby, I'll give you the Winter Soldier and all my commands to kind of control him, and just kind of patting like his face. So, but Sarah called at the wrong time, and I love Sam trying to play with it. He's like, I'm gonna have to kill that guy. Yeah, you know me and my bait deals, yada yada yada. And it's like she says, Sam sets things off in motion. The entire place is, they're putting a bounty on them for killing Selby. Luckily, Sharon shows up in time, and it's like, whoa, Sharon, this guy, he's helping us. It's like, yeah, you remember how I got in trouble for stealing the shield for Steve and stealing your wing so that you could help him from helping him to, help stop him? So, to get away from him. So I thought that was so interesting. But what was really interesting is diving into Sharon this episode. And I thought this was so fascinating that Sharon is very cynical now. Like, for her, she was like, because Sam's like, I get it, I was on the run. She's like, yeah, but you had the Avengers backing you. So when the time came, you were able to kind of come back, because also he wasn't on the run alone. Because we still don't know everything Black Widow was up to. We don't know everything Natasha was up to. We'll get more insight into that with Black Widow when it finally comes out. So that'll give us some insight on that front. But at least he wasn't alone. Obviously, we don't know if him and Steve were together the entire time. Obviously, we know Bucky was in Wakanda at that time. So I'm curious, so it's like, but at the same time, it's like when it's all said and done, you kind of got cleared because you're an Avengers. The world was in trouble, so we need the Avengers, so we kind of ignored everything. Granted, General Ross would still kind of be a dick about it. Rhodey, arrest him, that whole thing. But for her, it's like, I'm a regular civilian. So when the government turns against me, I'm kind of left to my own devices. She's like, hell, my own dad doesn't even know where I'm at. It's like, damn, that's rough. So she's actually been making a killing on the island. She's selling stuff. It's like, he's like, yeah, selling fake Monets. It's like, and Zemo's like, no, these are real deals. And then Bucky being like, yeah, half the stuff in the Louvre and stuff like that are fake. And he's like, yeah, I know you guys are so worldly. And then Sam looks it up and it's like, oh yeah, so what does Google say? He's like, holy crap. So she's been living it up. But as I was saying earlier, she's really cynical because for her, she's like, oh yeah, you know that whole hero thing's hypocrisy, right? I mean, of course you do. On some level, you deep down have to know that. Otherwise, you wouldn't have given up the shield. And Zemo's like, he realizes that not so deeply. If he was, because also it's like, but we've seen the hypocrisy of the hero thing. Sam has experienced it more and more recently of oh yeah, just because you're a hero doesn't mean jack squat. You can easily just get tossed aside in many different regards. See how life's worked out for you. Because time and time again has shown that you being a black man, it's that kind of takes precedence over and then the moment it's oh, you're a hero, that's when things start being wait, oh, sorry, we didn't recognize you, sir. That type of situation, that your name, it's Falcon, kind of comes first and foremost before you just being a human being. You being a human being, just a regular person struggling, should come first. I'm sure that kind of leans into it. But also the way she went after, Bucky too, because it's oh, so what's the new Cap like? It's don't get us started. She's like, oh, you should know better than anyone, Mr. America, Cap's best buddy. And he was Bucky was like, she's awful now. Even I was like, man, she's harsh and cynical. To be fair, when you think about the circumstances, she has been on a run for 7 years, because it implies she didn't get snapped. So she's been on run for the 2 years in between Civil War and Infinity War, but also implying that she was here during the blip. So I just thought that was kind of fascinating. And it's I'm going to help clear your name. And she's it's almost oh, you're using my life as a bargaining chip. He's like, no, that's not what I mean. It's just, I promise you, I will make a deal with you, fine. kind of almost you won't just trust me, fine, we'll make a deal. I'll help you get your name cleared. But I also love that, it's all right, just enjoy the party. And we even see, Zemo kind of partying it up. I do like that. Kind of adding this human. It's once again, it's enemies, former enemies. We already saw that with Sam and Bucky to a certain extent, in Civil War, kind of working together and everything. Which even that was a line too of Bucky saying that's actually what convinced Sam, because he's when Steve wouldn't sign the Accords, you went against the law. You sided with him and believed in me, and so I just need you to kind of have that faith in me now type of situation. So I thought that was interesting. But getting back to it, they're trying to find the scientist Nagel, who is responsible for the super soldier serum and it being recreated, and we kind of find him, and we kind of find out, like, he talks about, like, oh, they got the blood sample from some American at first, and they were looking at you. I was like, did he get Steve's blood? It's like, no, because Peggy destroyed the last sample of Steve's blood in Agent Carter at the end of season 1. We know that. So I was like, how did you? It's like, did it get it from Bucky? It's like, no, I don't see that. And it completely slipped my mind until it's like, right, Isaiah. I didn't even think about it because they literally made the point to tell you, like, oh, he said last episode, they took my blood. So it didn't even correlate in my head that like, right, Isaiah's the one they were referencing. And that's what bothered him so much. It's like, oh, that American. It's like, for him, it's like, it's like he was already treated like a test subject, and that's all he is, the quote-unquote American test subject. It's like they don't even say his name because it's showing that he's more of a thing rather than a person. So that's what rubbed Sam the wrong way. But when the time came, well, we also learned that he made, because he wanted to do this just to prove that he could. His work got stopped, so the project was abandoned because he got snapped. But the moment he came back, the power broker here at Madripoor ended up giving him the resources necessary. So when the time came, he actually ended up making 20 vials. So it seems like amongst her group, because it's Carly and 7, so in total there's 8, currently 7, because one of them died last episode. If that number is still to kind of be taken as it is, so they're down to 7 in total. But at the very least, that's implying there's at least 12 other vials that they haven't used yet. Like, so I'm guessing they're waiting for the right moment to find the most loyal of people to give it to, maybe, because they kind of imply it later on when they're like, oh yeah, Nagel's dead, so I guess we've got the only supply, so it's not like the power broker won't come after us, which I thought was interesting. But also we have Sharon kicking some ass on her own, obviously showing, like, also, yeah, let's not cut away from the fact is we are killing people. At one point, like, she threw a knife and it went through a dude's arm. Hell, even at one point, like, Bucky threw a pole and it stabbed someone in, like, the shoulder and stuff like that. It's like, plus she's shooting people. It's like, oh, we're not hiding the fact that, right, there's no cutting away from this. It's like, we're straight up killing people, so, I mean, I guess it's almost an effed up thing of like, well, this is kind of unlawful territory, so we'll skirt those lines a little bit. But obviously Sharon kicking ass, taking names, kicking names and taking ass, as Mantis would say. Because I always remember saying that, but I could never remember who has said it, and it's Mantis in Guardians of the Galaxy 2, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think it was in Infinity War. I think it was in... It might have been in Infinity War, but I'm pretty sure it was... No, I think it might have actually been in Infinity War, if I remember correctly. Well, regardless. But at the end of it all, Zemo made sure to kill Nagel because it's like, no, we can't have anyone else out there making more super soldier serum. Like, if he's the one that created it, we need to kill it at the source. So now we're not going to... It's like, I want the super soldiers all dead, so, like, there's no way we're going to let them kind of run rampant. Let there be some guy out there that can just make it. So... Obviously, there's the shootout situation, which I love, that Sam was like, no, you were supposed to follow me. He's like, it's like in every action movie, you're supposed to go the way I did. And it's like them bickering, even Sharon be like, this is not the time. Also, your boy Zemo finally puts on the mask. Also, had it ever shown that he's a skilled fighter like that? I'm like, where the hell did that come from? I don't think it ever really showcased that in Civil War. I was like, yo, I didn't know Zemo could kick ass like that. That's interesting. Like the tactical role, the just straight up kicking ass. It's like, yo, interesting. He ends up getting the car and he rolls up. It's like, all right, let's get out of here. Which I love the inverse of Sam. He's like, oh, so you're not going to pull up the seat? And Bucky's like, nope. Which obviously, if you remember, that's what happened in Civil War. Sam wouldn't move up the seat. He was like, Bucky's like, could you pull up your seat? He's like, nope. So, it comes full circle in that regard. But Sharon's just like, you guys going ahead. I'm just going to stay here and, just make sure you clear my name. And then I'm like, wow, you're really just going to be fine on your own? Oh, it's like, yep, get in contact with so-and-so because, get in touch with so-and-so, like things are changing. I'm like, okay. Once again, it kind of leans into what I was bringing up earlier. A lot can happen in potentially 7 years. Once again, if she was going, 2 years is enough, but I think 7 years. Obviously, the fact that she made herself so comfortable and Magdeburg, it kind of like I said, her being very like cynical about heroes and stuff like that. Because for her, it's like it doesn't matter what you do in the end, because everything, just one moment, like your entire life can turn upside down. Like there's no like heroism to everything. Like no one gives a crap about heroes. Like the hypocrisy behind, I think, like the hypocrisy she was talking about, like what heroes represent. Like I said, just like, I think who she is as a person like kind of changed. So I don't know whether it's just like, you know, she like, I immediately was like, wait, are we going to find out she's the power broker? I feel like someone would have pointed that out. I feel like Nagel would have, because he's working for the power broker. So either that or Sharon is, or not, unless she's actually still secretly working with the CIA. But the fact is, like, the fact she got in the back car like that makes me think, like, she must work with the power broker or something. Like, or at least she's connected to somebody powerful. Because if that was a CIA thing, like, she wouldn't have gotten in the back seat. I would have expected, like, the front seat or something like that. And be like, yeah, we got to get in contact with someone because stuff's going down. It also makes sense who's the person contacting Carly, like, oh, I'm going to find you, I'm going to kill you. It's this power broker from Magdeburg. So hopefully we get kind of an image of who that person is and what they look like soon enough, maybe. So, but I just think that's so interesting, potentially making it so that Sharon's kind of going a little dark side a little bit. I think that'd be interesting if it ends up being the case. Not less, like I said, I don't see that as like an undercover thing, but it might be revealed to be. But it's like she's definitely connected to something shady, you know. Now whether, like I said, whether she's like deep shade into some dark stuff or not, we'll ultimately have to wait and see. But I just thought that was kind of fascinating. I mean, to have her get up in her situation like she does means she's got to have some powerful friends and just some very powerful dealings with some powerful and very bad people, most likely. So I'm interested into that, finding out like what her whole deal is. Like, you know, once again, we've seen like people talk about like obviously the way the world was 5 years ago. So, like I said, a lot of stuff can change in that time. A lot of your perspective on a lot of things can change, because we don't know what the hero world really looked like in that 5 years, because that was something we never really, like, obviously there's conversation between Cap and, you know, Steve and Natasha in that time frame, but even then it's like we still don't really know the ins and outs. We're still being filled in about what happened during the blip, you know, what the world was like. So what was also interesting too is obviously the conversation with Sam saying like he believes he made a mistake, because for him it's like, how many people have to get basically rolled over, and like how much terrible stuff has to happen for a hunk of metal, that being the shield. That shield has such a terrible history now. It's like Isaiah, and now it's like it's led to like the super soldiers currently running amok. Now it's like that shield, yes, like it holds a lot of what Steve represented, sure, but there's also so much of a dark side to that shield, because it's also associated with like, you know, what everyone else is up to, but also just like the super soldier serum in general, you know, the dark side of that. Which Bucky's like, yeah, but that hunk of metal has also saved a lot of lives too. And he's like, yeah, so I made a mistake giving it up. And Bucky's like, yeah, he's right. And Sam's like, I should have destroyed it. Which, you know, once again, it's like that shield means a lot. That is a symbol for a lot of people. It stands for a lot of things. And because of that, he's like, that's why I'm going to take it from Walker from it. So it's almost like, if you're not going to take up the mantle, Cap, then I'll take the shield and I will wield, you know. But it's like, are you the right person too? Because he left it for Sam. So, I mean, I think that's going to be the whole conversation. Obviously, once again, as people have brought it up, as I am aware of, because I'm not well versed in comic books, but it has been something I picked up. Obviously, knowing that both, at one point in time, Sam is Captain America, and, you know, Bucky eventually becomes Captain America too. So at different points in time, they do both take up the mantle. So I think that's going to be the thing of like flipping back and forth. I think it is going to ultimately be Sam's, because it was Cap's decision to kind of pass it to him at the end of the day. So regardless, it's definitely going to be interesting to see where things end up taking us on that front. Also begs the question, who was the one that shot Selby? You would assume that was Sharon that did that, but maybe not. I would have assumed that that was her doing that to help them out, but it's like, it was almost making it seem like they were implying that someone else pulled the trigger in that regard to kind of set them up like that. I don't know. Once again, it's like you also can't discount Zemo. The man has already probably got plans upon plans about what he's got planned next. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where things kind of go on that front. And then finally, we have to talk about the stinger at the end with Bucky picking up some stuff. And at first, I'm like, what is that? I was like, And like Bucky's like getting the feeling like, okay, he's like, because it's like, I'm going to take a wall, and he goes and finds another one. And he's like, yeah, like I should have figured, like, you know, come on out, like should have known it was only a matter of time before he caught up to him. I was like, what the hell? And he turns around and it's someone from Wakanda. I was like, of course, right? And she's like, I'm here for Zemo. I was like, of course you would, because once again, they brought it up. Wakanda's not going to be too happy because he did kill their king after all, and so of course they'd go there. And I'm curious, is this going to tie in? And it's something I brought up, I think, last episode. Are we going to touch on anything about Bucky's time in Wakanda? Like, could that be potentially something we see in the Wakanda series that they're planning for Disney Plus, or could it be something that gets covered here, just even the slightest bit? So like, obviously they're tight with Bucky, but it's the thing of like, I can't let you have Zemo. Maybe after we've done what we've done and needed him for, then you can have him. But it's also like, no, we need him. He killed our previous king. We need justice for that. So we couldn't get to him before, but now he's free game. So we'll see how that turns out next episode, because that's definitely going to be interesting. Like I said, it didn't even click my head to think, like, right, Wakanda. Like I said, he brought it up at the beginning to let you know, like, yeah, they've probably been keeping an eye on Zemo the entire time, just waiting for an opportunity. Or at the very least, they probably got the news about him escaping and figured this was the time to do it. But I'm really interested to see where all of this ultimately ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.